It was one of those rare, sacred Sundays when the world finally leaves you alone. No texts, no deadlines, no broken sprinklers or leaking gutters. Just me, a cold Sam Adams, and the game flickering on the 65-inch screen that hung like a holy altar in my living room. My recliner groaned under my weight like it always did, familiar and loyal, far more than I can say for most things in my life. Stephanie was upstairs, probably pretending to clean the closet again, or maybe ordering throw pillows we didn't need from some overpriced boutique she wouldn't shut up about last week. We'd been married for 27 years, and even though I hadn't said it out loud, I'd started feeling like I was sharing a home with a roommate who just happened to wear my last name. Still, on nights like this, I let the silence feel like peace, not warning. Just as the quarterback dropped back on 3rd and long, a soft ding echoed through the room. Not from my phone, but from the smart TV's corner notification panel. I squinted, already annoyed, assuming one of my fantasy football updates was leaking through. But then came the words, crisp and searing in white Helvetica. Last night was wild, I still smell you on me. My breath stopped mid-sip as my eyes froze on the name above the message. Nick G. A name I didn't recognize, but that wasn't what rattled me. It was the fact that this message had synced from Stephanie's iPhone. Before I could even move, another text slid into view, this one worse. Next time I want to take you somewhere no one will recognize you. That dress you wore. I couldn't focus all night. My fingers tightened around the beer bottle as if crushing it might stop the messages. But they kept coming, rapid fire, like bullets made of glass, each one shattering some illusion I hadn't even realized I still believed in. I didn't scream. I didn't shout her name or storm upstairs or pull the plug. Instead, I sat there, watching every secret of my wife's second life unfold on the same screen where we used to watch Jeopardy together. My heart didn't race. It sank, deep into something cold and bottomless. The only sound in the room was the commentators shouting over the crowd noise, pretending this was just another Sunday night, while on my screen, the woman I loved was telling another man what she'd do to him next time. Right there in the home I built, on the couch I picked out, beneath the roof I paid for every month like clockwork. And all I could think, as the game faded into the background and her words lit up the room, was that maybe the silence I'd mistaken for peace had always been something much darker. I don't remember the moment I turned the volume down, only that it happened, instinct maybe, as if I was preparing the space for something unholy, because that's exactly what it became. My living room, once a place of laughter and burnt popcorn and movie nights with my wife in fleece pajamas, had transformed into a kind of personal theater of cruelty, where I was the only spectator and the main attraction was the absolute unraveling of everything I thought I understood about love, loyalty, and the woman upstairs folding laundry in my t-shirt. The messages didn't stop. They just kept bleeding across the screen like a grotesque slideshow of betrayal, each one more detailed, more vulgar, more intimate than the last. A play-by-play of nights I had been told were girls' dinners or late meetings or I need some time for myself. One message, and I swear this will stay burned in my brain until the day I die. Read. I still have scratches on my back from the hotel mirror. You're dangerous, Mr. G. And I remember thinking, hotel mirror? Stephanie used to make me feel like a criminal for forgetting to take the trash out. But now she's out here carving her initials into some guy's spine at a Marriott while I'm at home boiling pasta and wondering why the dog keeps pacing by the door like it's waiting for her. My hands were shaking, not from rage. Not yet. But from something far worse. That kind of sick, hollow knowing that only comes when your gut finally catches up to what your heart has been trying to deny for months, maybe years. That's when the photos started showing up, blurry at first, then clearer, as if the universe wanted me to squint, to really lean in and see it, to absorb the full weight of what had been done to me in my own house under my own roof, while I paid the bills and fixed the fence and worked overtime so she could find herself. I didn't yell. I didn't march upstairs. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, letting it all wash over me, wave after poisonous wave, her moans spelled out in text bubbles, her secrets displayed like trophies, her laughter captured in a video that auto-loaded and nearly made me vomit right there on the hardwood floor I installed myself. I muted the TV completely, not because I needed silence, but because the sounds of the crowd cheering from the game felt cruel, almost mocking, like the world outside hadn't just imploded in front of me. And somewhere, in the echoing vacuum of that moment, I made a choice, not to fall apart, not to scream or break something or beg for answers, but to document. To remember. To let her dig the hole deeper with every message, because the deeper it went, the colder I became. I wasn't just the husband now. I was the observer. The collector. The witness preparing for war. There's a particular kind of horror that doesn't scream in your face, it whispers, low and venomous, like the hum of a rattlesnake hidden under dry leaves, waiting for you to step just close enough. That's how it felt as the screen blinked again, not with another message, but with a flicker, a soft, almost imperceptible stutter in the smart TV's feed, like even the system itself was choking on the filth it had been forced to display. I watched as the image froze for a split second, then resumed, only this time it dragged the last message across the screen twice, as if some invisible force wanted to make sure I read it again. I can still taste you on my lips. I could practically hear the blood roaring in my ears as the room grew darker, though I hadn't touched the lights. Somewhere in the house, the upstairs floor creaked, maybe from her moving around, maybe from something far more cruel, the weight of memory pressing down on a home built on lies. For a brief moment, the screen went black. Just total silence and my own reflection, pale and hollow-eyed, staring back at me from the glass. And then, like the final nail in some digital coffin, the message history restarted from the beginning, a full reel of every sick, intimate exchange, automatically synced and replayed in reverse order like some cursed VHS tape from hell. That was when I realized what must have happened. Earlier that week, I had updated the SmartThings app, linking her iPhone to the system for convenience, for Spotify, calendar reminders. Those damn meditation podcasts she played in the mornings like she was some suburban monk. Turns out her iCloud settings were still set to auto-sync to shared devices, and tonight, that little checkbox I'd ignored had become the crack in the dam. Her filth was flooding my living room not because of a mistake, but because the universe decided it was time for me to see it all, every lie, every groan, every midnight rendezvous she thought she had buried in password-protected shadows. I didn't know whether to thank the glitch or curse it, because what started as a technological hiccup had quickly become a reckoning, one I hadn't asked for, but now couldn't unsee. There was something poetic, almost biblical, about the way her secrets had been dragged into the light by the very device meant to entertain and relax us. I thought of all the times we sat here together, pizza nights, Christmas movies, our daughter's graduation replayed on the very same screen now soaked in shame, and I felt something old and feral crawl up my spine. I stood up slowly, walking toward the screen like it might shatter if I got too close, and whispered to no one in particular, "Okay, Steph, game on." Because in that moment I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore, I was a man with a plan, and the glitch had just handed me the match to burn it all down. When I finally moved, not from panic, not from pain, but from a kind of terrifying clarity that I imagine only hits soldiers and survivors, I didn't scream her name. Didn't march up the stairs to tear open the closet doors or demand answers that would have only come in the form of lies wrapped in crocodile tears. No, I moved like a man who had already died and was just cleaning up what was left. I turned off the TV, quietly, carefully, not because I was afraid she'd hear, but because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing I was broken. In that moment, I was something else entirely, something she had never seen in me before, cold, calculating, and absolutely silent. I stood there in the dark, the reflection of the black screen showing the shadow of a man she hadn't met yet. And I waited. Not for her to confess, not for her to explain, but for the fury to settle into something useful. Upstairs, I could hear the hangers sliding across the rail as she moved clothes around, like that mundane sound could somehow drown out the weight of what she'd been doing behind my back for over a year. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge, my body moving on autopilot like I was just another actor in a life that had suddenly become a lie. I popped open another beer, not because I wanted it, but because it gave me something to hold, something that wasn't shaking, something that wasn't her. And when she came downstairs a few minutes later, barefoot, wearing one of my old t-shirts like it was still some symbol of belonging, she looked at me with that same half-distracted expression she always wore when she was pretending to care about my day, like a woman too tired to love, too busy to try, too bored to even fake it anymore. I smiled at her, and that smile must have scared her more than a scream would have, because she blinked and hesitated in the doorway like she didn't recognize me. "Long day?" I asked, voice steady, the kind of voice you use at funerals, low, reverent, final. She nodded, mumbled something about traffic and meetings and a coworker who wouldn't shut up, and then kissed me on the cheek before walking past me toward the stairs again. I watched her go, memorizing the way her body moved, not with love, not with lust, but like a hunter tracking his prey through familiar woods. I didn't flinch. I didn't follow. I just sat at the kitchen island with my beer, the one she didn't know I didn't want, and I started writing things down. Times, dates, names, details from every message I could recall. Because tonight wasn't about confrontation. It was about gathering ammunition. The storm hadn't come yet, but I could feel it rising inside me. Slow, controlled, and deadly. And when it hit, it wouldn't be loud. It would be surgical. And she would never see it coming. Sleep didn't visit me that night. Not even briefly, not even mercifully. It stayed away like it knew I was no longer a man who could close his eyes without seeing things he could never unsee. I lay there, still as stone beside the woman who had unknowingly exposed the filthiest pieces of herself to me in the most ironic, cinematic twist of fate I'd ever witnessed. And every time I heard her steady breathing, I imagined the sounds she must have made with him. The more I stared at the ceiling, the more the images returned. The texts, the voice notes, that video where she called him by the same pet name she used to whisper in my ear after making love in our first apartment. I didn't cry. Crying would have been easier. Instead, I stared into the dark like it held answers. Like if I stayed awake long enough, maybe I could reverse time and fix the moment I linked her phone to our smart TV. But I couldn't. And deep down, I didn't want to. By the third night, I had gone from hurt to obsessed. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I was gathering data like an investigator who knew the crime had already been committed, but refused to walk away until every fact was nailed to the wall. I started logging into her cloud account from my laptop, using the same birthday password combination she'd never changed in all our years together. And what I found made the first night's horror seem like a warm-up act. There were dozens of images, blurred hotel sheets, bathroom selfies, a pair of boxers she had once claimed she bought for me. There were rideshare receipts for pickup points she never told me about, timestamps for late-night FaceTime calls that occurred while I was out back, grilling burgers and humming along to a Van Morrison song she said she loved. She was good, disturbingly good, at pretending everything was normal, at folding laundry and sharing meals and offering the occasional lazy kiss on the cheek. Like she hadn't just finished doing God knows what with a man named Nick whose last name I now knew, whose LinkedIn I had already bookmarked. And still, through it all, I said nothing. I acted like the same old husband, kissed her goodbye when she left for work meetings, nodded when she told me she was too tired for sex, smiled when she said she needed space. For a weekend spa trip she never actually booked, because I wasn't looking for an apology anymore. I was building something darker, colder, more satisfying than forgiveness. This wasn't just betrayal, this was a chessboard, and I was finally learning how to move the pieces. I began copying emails, downloading every image, every text thread, every calendar entry that proved how long she'd been playing me for a fool. She didn't realize it yet, but every breath she took, every step she made, every lie she layered over another. I was watching, recording, memorizing. And when I made my move, it wouldn't be loud. It would be final. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But whoever coined that phrase never told you how satisfying it feels to start cooking it. The morning I walked into Mitchell and Gaines Family Law, I didn't feel rage anymore. What I felt was sharper than that. Cleaner, colder, like the tip of a scalpel before an incision. The woman at the front desk offered me a polite smile, and I returned it, hiding the chaos behind my eyes with the same fake charm Stephanie had probably used on Nick. My attorney Claire Mitchell came highly recommended, a legal bloodhound with a neck for ironclad settlements and a reputation for reducing adulterous spouses to puddles on deposition day. I didn't need fireworks. I didn't need courtroom drama. I needed leverage, precision, and an airtight escape route that left my wife alone, exposed, and cornered. And Claire? She wasn't just ready, she relished it. She listened, took notes, asked questions only a woman who had seen this same scene play out 100 different ways could ask, and when I showed her the screenshots, the calendar logs, the synced cloud files, the videos, her expression didn't change. She simply said, "We can work with this," and started pulling papers from a red file folder like she'd been waiting her entire week to unleash hell on someone named Stephanie. But that was only half the plan. Because even as I signed the first set of draft documents for a surprise divorce petition, something darker was taking shape in the back of my mind, a need for closure that paper couldn't deliver, something she'd feel before she ever saw the paperwork. That's when I called Vince. Vince Lattimore, an old friend from college, now a part-time actor, part-time bartender, full-time provocateur, the kind of guy who could smile and slice you open in the same sentence. I told him I needed him for a single night. One performance. One scene. And when I explained what I had in mind, he just chuckled and said, "Goddamn, Tom. I didn't think you had this in you." We planned it like a stage production down to the second. I knew where she'd be, what she'd wear, what she'd drink, what fake little laugh she'd use at dinner when she tried to flirt her guilt away. And Vince? He'd be the waiter, polished shirt, flawless posture, and a delivery that would make the devil himself grin. But instead of bringing dessert, he'd deliver something else, a small envelope. Thick. Heavy. Containing every detail of her betrayal, printed, bound, time-stamped. On the table. In public. In front of her new lover or whoever she thought she was charming that night. Because this wasn't just about catching her in a lie anymore. This was about turning the lights on in a room she thought she'd sealed shut forever. I didn't want justice. I wanted spectacle. I wanted silence followed by humiliation, the kind you don't walk off with a spa weekend and a bottle of wine. And best of all, I wouldn't even need to be in the room. There's a cruel sort of symmetry to life sometimes, how pain circles back to the very days that once meant something pure. Our wedding anniversary, of all days, had arrived like a mockery wrapped in a bow, the 28th to be exact, though the number felt more like a body count than a celebration. I played my role to perfection that morning, kissed her cheek, handed her the usual bouquet she didn't deserve, and acted like a man still stupidly in love with a woman who had forgotten how to look me in the eye without blinking. She smiled, tight-lipped, and told me she had plans that evening, dinner with a colleague, someone from the firm who owed her a steak. I nodded, swallowed my pride whole, and told her to enjoy herself. She didn't notice the way I held her gaze just a few seconds longer than usual, or maybe she did and mistook it for vulnerability instead of what it really was, the quiet before the execution. She wore the red dress. That damn dress, the one she used to save for charity events or anniversary nights back when those meant something. I watched her leave from the upstairs window like a ghost, the hem swaying like a siren's flag, unaware that the trap had already been set and the wolves were already circling. The restaurant was one I'd chosen, upscale, open floor, full of glass and light and eyes. She arrived at 7:04 p.m., perfectly on time, perfectly composed, sliding into a candlelit booth across from a man who looked 10 years younger and exactly as smug as I imagined. I wasn't there in person, but I didn't need to be. Vince was. Playing the waiter, dressed crisp, with a linen napkin over one arm and a smirk that could cut glass. They ordered wine, appetizers, and that's when he did it, no hesitation, no build-up. He returned with a black envelope resting on a small silver tray, placed it gently between her salad fork and water glass, and said, "Compliments of your husband." "Happy anniversary, ma'am." She didn't open it right away. At first she just stared at it, like her brain couldn't compute what was happening, like the room had changed temperature and she was the only one who noticed. And then, like slow-motion theater, she picked it up, peeled it open, and began flipping through the contents. One photo. Two photos. Text messages. Screenshots. Hotel receipts. Time-stamped records. Her hand began to tremble. Her face turned the color of candle wax. Her date leaned over to look and recoiled. Vince, ever the professional, leaned closer and whispered something I had scripted word for word. "There's more. Legal copies. At home. He knows everything." Then he turned, walked away, and left her sitting there, her mouth slightly open, her entire world caving in under the weight of every lie she'd ever told. The restaurant buzzed on, oblivious to the quiet collapse in booth 14. And me? I sat at home, sipping the same bourbon I once reserved for special occasions. And tonight, for the first time in years, it actually tasted like one. She came home just past 10. Not late by normal standards, but when you've just had your soul drop-kicked across a white linen dinner table in front of strangers, I imagine even 5 minutes in the car feels like a century. I heard the garage door grind open like a dying animal, heard her heels clicking against the hardwood like gunshots in a church, and I didn't move. I stayed right where I was, in the den, sipping bourbon under dim lighting, my posture calm but my heart thrumming with the kind of grim satisfaction I hadn't felt since I caught my first fish as a kid and realized I could pull something living out of water and make it stop moving. She didn't say a word at first, just hovered in the hallway like a ghost with a purse, paralyzed between confrontation and collapse. I watched her reflection in the dark window as she finally spoke, voice tight, fake sweet, trembling at the edges. "Can we talk?" The silence I gave her in return was far louder than anything I could have shouted. I let it stretch. I let it breathe. And then I stood up, slow, deliberate, like a man delivering a eulogy, and handed her a manila envelope. Not the same one from dinner. A different one. Thicker. Sealed. Legal. Inside. Divorce papers, property division, evidence logs, witness declarations, and a notarized document naming me sole owner of the house. She opened it with trembling fingers, mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from the deep. And then, softly, almost childlike, "You're divorcing me?" I tilted my head the way she used to when I asked her what was wrong, and she said, "Nothing." I reminded her, gently but with the same edge she once used to justify sleeping with another man, that this house was purchased in my name before the marriage, that her affair voided the spousal claim to my retirement assets, and that thanks to a little-known clause in her job contract, her conduct during company time could very well cost her her position. She tried to speak again, maybe to beg, maybe to lie, but I was already walking away. She collapsed onto the couch, the same one where we used to hold hands during storms, the same place I once imagined us growing old together. Now she sat there alone, clutching papers like a lifeboat that had already sunk. I didn't feel pity, not even a drop. I felt completion, like I had sealed something, locked it up, buried it, and turned away without looking back. And in that moment, with her behind me and the door to my new life wide open, I realized something. This wasn't just checkmate. This was the moment the king walked off the board. Not because he lost, but because the game no longer deserved him. I didn't watch her leave the house for the last time. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing your absence wounds deeper than your presence ever did. And in Stephanie's case, the silence I left behind had already done more damage than any screaming match ever could. She moved out the following week, stuffed into a rental apartment on the edge of town with beige walls, no view, and a security deposit she barely scraped together. Apparently, her boy toy Nick wasn't the white knight she imagined, because the moment things got messy, the man who once moaned her name in hotel bathrooms ghosted like a magician. Poof, just like that. One minute she was his fantasy, and the next she was a liability with a legal trail and a red dress reputation that no decent man wanted to be caught dead next to. Word spread fast. Much faster than I expected. Maybe it was because of the restaurant stunt, or maybe people were just bored and hungry for gossip. But either way, the whispers started swirling like crows above a carcass. Her job found out. Her supervisor, who also happened to be her friend, dropped her from the quarterly pitch team and encouraged her to take an unpaid leave while HR conducted a quiet review. Her parents, who once swore I was too emotionally distant and too focused on work, called me in tears. Not to apologize, of course, but to beg me not to go public with the legal file. Even her sister, who once called me a robot in khakis, showed up at my door with wine and some half-hearted excuse about not knowing the whole story. I didn't let her in. I didn't need sympathy, especially not from people who once looked through me like I was wallpaper in my own marriage. I just needed peace. And now, for the first time in years, I had it. I heard from a friend at the country club that she'd been spotted crying in her car last Friday night, parked alone with the engine running and her head against the steering wheel like a woman who'd finally realized the gravity of the world she'd shattered. I won't lie to you, that image stayed with me longer than I thought it would. Not because I felt sorry for her, but because part of me had always assumed she'd land on her feet, that she'd find some other sucker to swoop in and rescue her from her own mess. But life doesn't always deliver backup plans to people who treat others like disposable conveniences, and karma, when it finally arrives, doesn't knock gently. It crashes through the door, throws your suitcase into the street, and slams the locks behind you. And me? I was already painting the guest room, planning a fishing trip, and learning how to sleep again. Not just next to someone, but as a whole man, no longer haunted by a half-hearted lie. It's strange how quiet a house can become when it's finally empty of lies. For weeks, I expected to hear her footsteps echoing down the hallway, or that sharp tone in her voice cutting through the silence like a knife when she asked why I hadn't taken out the trash again. But the silence that came afterward, after the storm and the ruin, wasn't the hollow kind I feared. It was clean, pure, like stepping out of a smoke-filled room and taking a deep breath for the first time in years. I started waking up without dread sitting on my chest like a sleeping dog. I cooked dinner for one. I played records that used to collect dust in the closet. I started walking more, sleeping better, even laughing again, the kind of laughter that comes from somewhere real, not the forced chuckles I used to give just to keep the peace with someone who hadn't loved me in a long, long time. The cabin came next. A small, lakeside place I'd always dreamed of buying but never dared to, because Stephanie said it was a waste of money. Funny how many of my dreams had been downsized over the years under the weight of her opinions. But now, with the divorce finalized and her shadow no longer lingering in my life like smoke after a fire, I wrote the check and never looked back. That place, nestled beneath tall pines with a dock that groaned under the weight of morning fog, became my sanctuary. I fished. I read. I sat still long enough to feel things again, to remember what it was like to simply exist without apology. I had no interest in dating, no need for revenge anymore. But then, one afternoon at the hardware store, I met someone. A quiet woman named Claire who worked at the high school library, who smelled like cedarwood and lemon, who asked about my day like she actually wanted to hear the answer. We didn't fall into anything fast. No whirlwind. No grand declarations. Just two people with scars, meeting each other at the end of long battles, recognizing something quietly familiar in the way the other smiled. A few months later, I posted a photo of us on the cabin deck. Just me, her, a dog I'd adopted, and a coffee mug with the words peace, finally, printed on the front. I didn't think much of it until someone told me Stephanie had seen it. Apparently, she's still in that rental. Alone. Unemployed. Her name now carries a stink that no perfume can cover. But I don't think of her often, not out of bitterness, but because some things just don't deserve space in the new life you fought like hell to earn. And as the sun sets behind the trees, and the water reflects back a face I finally recognize again, I realize that all the pain, all the betrayal, all the nights spent in silent rage, they weren't the end. They were the clearing of space. For something real. For something better. For me.